Welcome to Cooking with the Hockey Guy. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I figured I'm off a little early today because situations. Um, no, normally I work till 2:30 on a Sunday, but Yvonne's church time has been changed to 1 in the afternoon till 4 in the afternoon, so I had to get out of work early to come home so she could go to church. And I'm like, I'm really hungry, but I need to do a video, and I've got a headache because I didn't have enough caffeine last night, so that happens. Don't get caffeine headaches, boys and girls. They're not fun. Oh, nectar of the gods. So I figured, all right, well, I'm hungry, but I got to do a video, so I might as well do both. So I'm making myself some burgers. I'm cooking. This is something that's different. People are used to me eating BK, and look, it's a different room of the house, the townhouse, and the camera's going to continually focus when it doesn't need to. How's that? Is that better? Actually, I think that looks better. You guys tell me in the comments if you like it better. I think it looks better. And voila. Oh, that makes it worse. Oh, God. Great. So expansion. Expansion is coming next year in the form of the Las Vegas Golden Hairs, Golden Crosses, Golden Showers, Golden Nights. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm excited to have Vegas in the league. I am. Because we need more teams on the West Coast. As a Vancouver fan, I've watched as road trip after road trip after road trip has been arduous. It'd be nice to have more teams on the West Coast. So obviously I'm pulling for Seattle. But and somebody asked me like, well, what about? And I've had people make comments on videos like, well, what about Milwaukee? What about these cities? So I'm going to touch on different cities. I'm going to use an article I found here that I think is pretty accurate. It was written a few years ago. It was before Vegas was officially in. So it qualifies some other teams in there, some other cities that we know now probably aren't going to get it. And so let's just get right into this. Number one listed here for this list of lists is Quebec City. Now, I would love Quebec City to come back to the NHL. I'm a big Nordiques fan. I was always a Nordiques fan. The fact that the year they went to Denver, they won the Cup, upset me greatly. Almost as much as a Bruins fan, it upset me to see Ray Bourque have to go to Colorado to win a Cup. That was upsetting. But that was a few years after, of course. But yeah, seeing the Quebec Nordiques get ripped out of there, it was frustrating. But the problem right now is the Canadian dollar. Quebec has an arena, they have the fan base, they have the inside track because they went through all the procedures they needed to this time around. They just backed out because they knew they weren't going to get awarded a franchise. So Quebec is officially in the pipeline, but I honestly think they're going to get a relocation. I don't think they're going to get an expansion team. Now, number two on the list is the thing that everybody went nuts over a few years ago, which was the idea of a second team in Toronto. Maybe a team in Newmarket or some team in Southern Ontario. And I'll lump Hamilton in with this because Hamilton, of course, was, Jim Balsley's idea of moving Nashville, Pittsburgh, Arizona. Whoever he could move, he was moving to Hamilton. I don't think Hamilton would happen. I think Buffalo would block it. I don't think Toronto would. And I know there were rumors at the time that Toronto would block it, but why would Toronto block it? Toronto doesn't have a problem selling out tickets. And if Hamilton gets a team, that's another city close to them. You can get 18,000 fans into a Hamilton stadium. I know Cops Coliseum doesn't hold 18,000. I don't know if they've got anything newer than that can hold more than that. But right now, Hamilton wouldn't have a stadium that's got 18,000 people. And I know the MTS Center in Winnipeg has a lower capacity, but that's part of the problem with Winnipeg. That's one of those things that it's one of those things you don't want to talk a lot about because it's honestly true. Canadian dollar is really low, and they have the lowest amount of seats of any building in the NHL. Now, they're not drawing the lowest in the NHL, but that lowest capacity can come back to bite you later. So Hamilton. Hamilton and Southern Ontario in general can support more hockey. The idea that the Toronto Maple Leafs have some sort of monopoly and they wouldn't want another team in there. I honestly think the Toronto Maple Leafs would enjoy having another team in there. There were jokes said at the time of, oh, why would you let an NHL team into Toronto now? They don't have one, meaning the Maple Leafs are an American League team. But I honestly don't think that it would be a bad thing. I mean, you look at New York right now, okay? And I mean, yeah, I know New York City is, 20 million people, and it's a completely different scenario, but Canada is hockey mad. And for anybody who's American watching this, Canadians will watch all levels of hockey, good and bad and ugly. We'll watch everything. The Spengler Cup, I could have done videos on the Spengler Cup, which I doubt Americans are aware of. But up here in Canada, because you got guys wearing Team Canada jerseys and they win a medal or title or trophy or whatever you get with the Spengler, people watch it. And this is the Spengler Cup is made up of guys who either didn't make the NHL, guys who played in the NHL and are done in the NHL, or guys who are still trying to get back to the NHL. So one of the best forwards was Andrew Evatt, who I think Andrew Evatt's an underrated forward, and I'd like to see him back in the NHL at some point. And this was his attempt to do so. Mason Raymond played in the Spengler Cup this year. That's after getting cut by the Anaheim Ducks. So, and that also fits into the expansion idea in that not only do you have fans that will pay to see it in Canada, so you could get, in the article it mentions Nate Silver, who's that great mathematician that said Donald Trump could never win the election. Nate Silver stated that Canada could support 11 or 12 franchises altogether. And it's true. And Southern Ontario, you could stick another team there. Here's the problem. The NHL already knows that they've got fans in Southern Ontario. If you're in Southern Ontario and you're waiting for another team, the problem is the NHL already knows it has you as a fan. When it's expanded, you look at Columbus. Minnesota was to right or wrong. Nashville, both Florida teams, they're trying to create fans in new areas. That's why Arizona is so important to them. So it's not going to happen. So next up, Vegas. Well, we know Vegas got a team. Next up, Seattle. The interesting thing with Seattle, the building. They need a building. They need a building that's good for NBA and NHL. And they're not one and the same. Ask any Islanders fan. Ask anybody who's watched an Islanders game. Playing in an NBA stadium when you're an NHL team is bad. And what Seattle wants is the Sonics back. NHL's a backup plan. The Sonics are the main thrust of everything I've seen on Seattle sports. They want the Sonics back, and rightfully so. The team was ripped out from under them. I was upset for Seattle when they lost the team, and I wasn't even a Sonics fan. I'm a Celtics fan because these guys, and the Golden State Warriors, because they had the ugliest jerseys in the history of the world when I started cheering for them. So I was like, that's so ugly, and they were bad. This was in the days towards the end of Chris Mullin. They were bad, and I was like, oh, I feel so horrible for them. They got horrible jerseys and a horrible team. I'll cheer for them. Now it's the fad, it's the rage. Everybody cheers for the Warriors, except Oklahoma City fans don't cheer. The Thunder fans don't cheer for, and of course Oklahoma City's a sore topic for Seattle. So it all ties together. And does Seattle get an NHL team? The question you ask yourselves is, do they get an NBA team? If they get an NBA team and they build an NBA arena, they do not get an NHL team. Which leads to the next team on the list, next city on the list, Portland. Portland has always interested me. Yes, Portland supports the Winterhawks. The question I have is, if you live in Portland, and NHL tickets get kind of pricey, does Portland support the basketball, the NBA that's already there, build another arena for hockey, and support that as well? Portland has a good population, a good size population, but then it's not just a matter of population, it's a matter of will they watch hockey. Look at Carolina, look at Sunrise, Florida, look at Tampa at times. Having a big population doesn't necessarily mean you've got hockey fans there. And Portland's another one. You're not going to have, as they counted on with Florida, a bunch of Canadians who are down south for the winter, like we're geese. And I don't know. I have my doubts. The next one they have on the list is Hamilton. I've already touched on Hamilton. Hamilton and Toronto I put in the same category. You could get a second team there. It would get supported. It would make a lot of money. The NHL doesn't want it. So Saskatoon is on the list. Saskatoon I discussed a few days ago. Saskatoon would be an amazing story. And yes, they would struggle to support NHL hockey, but the entire province would rally around it. You'd have to call them the Saskatchewan, insert name of team here. If it was going to be an NHL team, you'd have to call it, not Saskatoon, you'd have to call it the Saskatchewan, I'll just say Rough Riders, because everything's Rough Riders, right? I'm kidding. Because Regina residents, weather permitting, would drive to Saskatoon, I believe, to watch NHL hockey. There was a real NHL team there, and they were called Saskatchewan Sled Dogs, whatever you want to call them. The River Dogs. You could just use the Corner Gas jerseys and the Corner Gas name and just the Saskatchewan River Dogs, and people would watch it. I honestly think it'd be one of the ultimate underdog franchises. You would have an NHL franchise that would rival the Green Bay Packers in terms of the ability to get that small population to be overcome by the fact that they're so damned excited to have a hockey team. Oklahoma City's on the list. I don't see Oklahoma City happening. It could. And keep in mind, I'm not just talking about expansion here. I'm talking about relocation. Because expansion is just Seattle. Right now, the NHL just wants Seattle. I think Portland's the backup. I think Portland's the backup if Seattle doesn't come through. Oklahoma City could be in third. They could be sliding in there in third place. But the NHL has no intention of expanding north of the border. But relocation? Possible. You could argue for relocation. Because there are a lot of teams that are honestly in financial trouble, and I don't understand why the NHL has to prop up all 30 teams and go, look, everybody's okay. Why won't you admit a few of these teams are ill and need to move? The NFL admits it, Major League Baseball admits it, the NBA admits it, and the NHL is steadfast and just, no, these are our teams and they don't move. The funny thing is, when Bettman took over, they couldn't wait to move the World Hockey Association teams. They couldn't wait, and the Oilers were on the chopping block next. Were barely saved. Otherwise, the Oilers would probably be in Oklahoma City. So Oklahoma City, I think they're a city that would get a relocation. Not on this list, and I'm kind of surprised it's not on this list, is Kansas City. Kansas City has an NHL-sized rink. Kansas City, you have the natural rivalry with St. Louis and Chicago and Minnesota, and natural city rivalries with basically the entire Norris division. I mean Central. Let's just call it the Norris. But Kansas City just hasn't, for whatever reason, had an owner come forward and push for a team. Milwaukee is low on the list as well because Milwaukee is perceived to not be in a position where they'd support it. I was reading yesterday because I did look this stuff up. Milwaukee is perceived as already being sports saturated between the Bucks and the Brewers, and the idea of putting another team in there, and the Packers are considered to be part of the picture too. So the idea of putting another team in Milwaukee, there's a perception that they wouldn't support it. I'm not saying it. I don't think anybody from Milwaukee would say it, but there's definitely people with money that think it's not worth it. Houston's on this list. I'm going to kibosh Houston right off the bat. Houston franchises do okay for a while, and then they tend to peter out. Houston was in the World Hockey Association, didn't make it to the NHL, and I think that's the only way Houston was going to make it to the NHL. I can't see a second team in Texas. I can't. Unless, potentially, and this is just thinking outside the box, unless Austin made a fantastic pitch. Because Austin is a city that technically, now you got all these other cities that are close, technically Austin doesn't have a professional sports franchise. Technically. There's all kinds of Texas cities that do, but technically they don't. So it's one of those thinking outside the box, what the hell's the NHL thinking kind of things. But I can't see Houston. I can't see it. And then the last on this list is Indianapolis. And other than the Indianapolis Racers being the team that sold Wayne Gretzky to Nelson Skalbania back in 1979, I can't see any reason to even talk about Indianapolis as an NHL destination. You've got the Colts, so football would be competing with the NHL. It, it's outside the realm of possibility in my eyes. So here's the challenge. Expansion, I think we can all agree, is going to Seattle. Or failing Seattle, then it's going to go to Portland. That's likely where it's going to go because the NHL knows it needs another Western team to balance the conferences out at 16 each. So who moves and where do they move? Now, Florida to Quebec is what everybody always says all the time. Carolina to Quebec is another one that I hear a lot of. But of the cities I've just mentioned, especially to me, Kansas City's a slam dunk. I don't understand why Kansas City doesn't get mentioned. I know they had a team, it only lasted 2 years, it wasn't great. Boo-hoo. That was over 30 years ago. I would think the NHL would give it another shot since they gave Atlanta another shot. I would think that Kansas City would get another shot as well. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Who do you move? And do they have an arena? Because the arena is the real tricky part. Even a lot of these Canadian cities, I'm like, I want to see them get a team. The arena is the tricky part. You've got to have, I would say, 18,000 capacity. You got to have those boxes. Those high-priced sky boxes are big. And you've got to be able to bring in massive revenues for the NHL to even consider it. And then you got to consider if it's an expansion team, they got to pay $500 million to even get into the NHL, which is ridiculous. Honestly, I think that's a ridiculous fee. It's like Gary Bettman became Dr. Evil and said $500 million, thinking nobody would ever give it. And then Quebec and Vegas came forward and go, okay, here you go. And he's like, I just got $1 billion. Holy crap! I should have told him I wanted $1 billion. I don't understand it because the NHL is not close to the NBA, Major League Baseball, or NFL in terms of their value, and yet they seem to value themselves much higher than the NFL, where, St. Louis Rams, we're going to move to LA. All right. Oakland Raiders, we're thinking about moving to St. Louis. Okay, whatever. It just feels to me like the NFL just says, all right, well, as long as you can make some money wherever you're going. You can't get a new stadium. All right, you can move. NBA, Seattle Sonics, we want to move to Oklahoma City. All right, done. No problem. Well, we tried to make it work. The NHL, it's like, well, we've lost money here for over 20 years. We don't care. We'll find an owner that'll stay there. And until we find an owner that'll stay there, nobody's moving. Kitty, there's stuff on the stove, Kitty. You can't be on the stove, Kitty. Do you understand? Do you understand? You're dumb. You're a dumb cat. You are a dumb cat. All right, that's it for me for now. I'm going to take the computer back up to the bedroom to continue my videos for today. I just figured I would do a little snippet while I was cooking. The burgers, all I do to make my burgers, I make sure I cook them in soy sauce because I love soy sauce. So I just cook my burgers that way. I find they taste better and there's more flavor to them. And there's nothing else. And of course, if you want them to taste like Big Macs, you get your Thousand Island dressing out, and then they're Big Macs because that's what happens. If you want to double up the patties, sometimes I do. All right, and if you're just browsing through, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And this has been Cooking with the Hockey Guy.